fast friends. We had coffee right before Thanksgiving, and I think we spent an hour and a half just chatting. I wish we had actually just done that today because it was really amazing. And I just want to stress this book is incredible. It is lyrical, it is powerful, and it is really impactful and important. So it's important on a personal level, a societal level, and a really global and spiritual level. So I read it the first time in a day, and then I read it a second time this morning, and it's really powerful, and I applaud you for doing something that I think will really heal and help people. So.
Thank you.
And I think it's a testament that we're not doing coffee at Laura's house, but we're here because obviously you have touched and affected so many people. And that's what I've been hearing for the last few weeks, ever since we said that we're going to do that. And with so many people who are here today, I have people from preschool, elementary school, Frank and Kathy Baxter, who came to my wedding 21 years ago in Delhi. And so it's amazing, many people who have been impacted by your work. So let's just go ahead and start chatting.
Let's begin, yeah.
So I'm going to start with, I want to stress how lyrical this book is. Because many self-help books can get lost in kind of the how-tos. But what's so lovely about this book is your writing. It's so beautiful in the prose. So I'm going to start with this quote, and then we'll just get into it. So through sickness, we discover the blessings of health. Through loss, we discover the true depths of love. Through foolishness, we know maturity and wisdom. Pain shocks us and propels us from where we thought we were, who we thought we were, to something far more real and true. And so I wanted to start with your personal journey because you have spoken and helped many people through their suffering, but something changed for you when you went through your own suffering.
Yeah. I think a lot of you know some of the story, but I was a rabbi for 27 years and had counseled thousands of people through those 27 years as they were on their own journeys through very painful, and in some cases almost unimaginably painful circumstances. And I thought I was, speaking a truth and doing a pretty good job of it. And then I experienced my own pain, physical pain, to a degree that in my universe was unimaginable, frankly, although I'm sure there are worse. But nerve pain is pretty horrible.
And you were brought to your knees.
I was brought to my knees. So what happened was son Aaron and I were driving home from dinner. We were driving west on Sunset and right into those two very odd, strange, dangerous intersections by the hotel, by the Beverly Hills Hotel. I had the right of way. I wasn't speeding. Didn't have a drink. We were at Dantana's. Spaghetti and meatballs. I might have been a little tired, but and we were going through the intersection, and a very large SUV that clearly didn't know the intersections. There are two left turns there, and the driver was clearly stopped and confused in the middle of the intersection, and we collided in a very frightening car accident, airbags, the whole thing. We spun around, and I remember looking at Aaron and just saying, "We're okay. We're okay." And I walked away from that car accident. It was a hit and run, by the way. So I walked away from that car accident thinking I was fine. And then about 2 months later, I started to have intermittent and very brief, but very intense stabbing pains in my lower back that would shoot down to my left toes. And my wife Betsy's here with my daughter Hannah in the front, and Betsy knows me better than I know myself. So she knows the truth of this. So I ignored it and worked through it, ignored it and worked through it. And they became more frequent and more elongated. And I just kept ignoring it and working and ignoring it and working. And then one day we were pulling the car into the garage, and I was in all of a sudden, just this constant pain that wouldn't stop, and I could not move my legs. And I don't know if any of you have had this experience or not before. It was the first time in my life when my brain told my body to move and it didn't move. I mean, just imagine your brain saying, oh, I'd like to pick up this bottle. And your brain says, right hand, pick up bottle. And it doesn't move. It's very frightening. And Betsy called the doctor. The doctor said, call the paramedics. You can't lift him out of the car. What did I say, of course? The old me. I don't need the paramedics. I said it a little more crassly than that. And so I opened the car door and I tipped my upper body over until gravity caused me to kind of flop out of the car like a fish onto the garage floor. And then I used my upper body to drag my lower body across the garage floor, the grease and the oil and all of that, up 4 or 5 stairs into the house. And that door from our garage goes into my study at home. And I got a couple feet inside the house and I just curled up fetus-like, screaming and begging for morphine. And Betsy, of course, had to watch this. And one of the nice things about being a rabbi, there are difficult things, but one of the nice things is how doctors, they just run to treat you if there's a problem.
Yeah.
I think it's probably really bad karma if the rabbi dies and he's one of your patients. But when you're a rabbi boy, doctors take care of you.
Good care.
Yeah, you get excellent medical care, even in this environment. And so we had oxy at the house within 45 minutes. And I started taking it. And it made me move the pain from a 10 to a 9.7 or something, so I got to the couch. And that began, to make a long story short, that began a lot of pain, a lot of opioids, a lot of steroids, injections, and then finally the head of the Spinal Institute at Cedar saying, look, if you want to be on the bima for Rosh Hashanah, none of this stuff's going to work. You have to have the surgery. And you have to have it now because Rosh Hashanah is in 12 days. So I had the surgery, and I had immediate relief from the most severe pain, but then I had all this post-surgical stuff, and in order to be on the bima, they kept giving me steroids, and I was eating opioids like candy, which, by the way, do not, for those of you who've taken them, know this. They don't make you high. They just dull everything. And then this was, for those of you who are Temple members know, we had just finished the renovation, and it was the big opening of the sanctuary, which, you know, I really believed in and had worked hard to accomplish with a lot of people. And the doctor said, listen, I have a plan. I can get you up on the bima for Rosh Hashanah, but I gotta give you an injection. I gotta shoot you up to do it. And again, the old me, I let him do it.
Well, and I think this goes to when you are a healer, you feel you need to continue to heal, but you had to heal yourself. And we talked, you know, the first thing that came up for me when we met was this idea of the weeds and the yellow birds, which you said was actually one of the title you wanted to do that. So
the actual title of the book, the title I proposed to the publisher was Weeds Bring Yellow Birds. And it has to do with a story. Now, they rejected it because the title doesn't make any sense unless you know the story. You have to read the book to know the story, and nobody buys a book with a title they can't understand. But this was my intended title for Weeds Bring Yellow Birds. Betsy even painted a picture for the cover of the book. So those who've been to our home, many of you have, you know we have this steep hill in the back. And we've been in that house for about 11 years, almost 12 in December. And that hill was planted with everything, just every plant you could imagine, including thousands of varieties of weeds. And I had spent, before this accident, about 10 years with potions and poisons and machetes, and I had an electric chainsaw. How many Jews could say that? I had loppers and picks and shovels, and I was at war every 2 or 3 days with the weeds on the back of the hill because I wanted this OCD-like perfect blanket of green ivy on my back. And Betsy, this is a joke in the book, some of you have heard it, I was up there every 2 or 3 days, falling, cursing, almost severing my own limbs. And Betsy would just stand in the kitchen and just shake her head. And she'd come out every few hours and say, you know, we could hire someone to do that. Which every Jewish wife has said it many times in the course of their marriages. And then I had this surgery and the opioids, and I'm sure we're going to get into the depression that followed, which was very dark, brief but very dark. And after about a month, I was able to get it out into the backyard and lie down on one of the lounges to warm myself and heal in the sun. And I remember lying on this lounge, kind of in this steroidal narcotic haze, and I opened my eyes and I saw a forest of weeds on this back hill. All those years of fighting those weeds, and in 6 weeks it was a freaking forest of weeds. And I felt like this is the final insult to my infirmity. You know, this is God giving me the big middle finger. And then I noticed there was this flock of these tiny little yellow birds flitting among these weeds. And they were beautiful. And those little yellow birds flitting and chirping kept me company for months. And that became a metaphor for me. Look, we all know that weeds on your back hill is a very first world problem. But they became a metaphor for me of the fact that sometimes if you cease to be at war with things that have been suppressed and repressed, quite beautiful things, have room to live in your life. And that's why I wanted to call this book Weeds Bring Yellow Birds, because it took pain to stop that war, that metaphorical war and real war that I've had in my life since I was 5 years old. You know, and scrubbing floors and toilets at my father's junkyard with my father shouting behind me at 5 years old, I want to see asses and elbows. And it took this debilitating pain to get me to stop that metaphorical war.
And what I love about the book is that so much of it is acceptance, being present with the pain and the discomfort, which we'll talk about. But you talk about so much loss and sadness and tragedy in this book. It's very emotional. People have lost children who have done bad things and how they overcome that. And even in your own case where you went through depression, we had a conversation about, you know, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah.
And you had really a profound
Yeah,
response.
so when Mallika and I were meeting just before Thanksgiving, she said, you know, this is the next why bad things happen to good people. And I stopped her and I said, you know, everyone says that, but that's not the title of the book. Look, I've been a rabbi 30 years, and in all of those 30 years, people have come and said, Rabbi, you know that book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People? That's what everyone thinks Harold Kushner called his book. He didn't. It's called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Because no one can write a book called Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. We wish that was an answerable question. We know Job's answer. We know the answer God gives to Job, which I'm happy to talk about in a minute. But so I stopped Mallika and I said, you know, Mallika, it's called When. And that's part of the healing process, is moving people from the question of why to the question of what. What, given this has happened, am I going to do about it? How am I going to change my life? Because why is a cul-de-sac, and you go around and around and around and around and around, and sometimes there is no why. And then what do? We have to find a way to make something of our suffering. You know, Dostoevsky said his greatest fear in his life was that he would not be worthy of his suffering. That's a very powerful statement. To live a life worthy of your suffering. We do not get to choose our suffering. And by the way, let me be very clear for those of you who haven't read it. This book is not a glorification or an idealization of suffering. It is not. But given, and I'm not saying that it's worth what we go through, but neither is it worth less. And the suffering that we endure is a very powerful teacher if we allow it to be. In fact, in my experience, and I'm all for God is love as much as the next guy, okay? But in my experience, it is only pain that really forces people to change their lives. Success does not teach us very much. It only encourages us to keep doing the same over and over and over and over again. It's only pain and real pain that forces people to change their lives. You know, the Talmud says if you are visited by pain, examine your life. And it doesn't mean that you've lived a life that has caused the pain. It means that pain is an opportunity to change your life. And it is. And I think this is what Dostoevsky was saying, that he wanted to be worthy of this opportunity that was being presented to him by his pain and his suffering.
So, and you'll have to, the pronunciation of Hineni. Hineni,
Yeah.
which is here I am. And here I am is I am, is really a primordial sound that in meditation we use. You know, in our tradition we use aham, and I am, amen, Abraham. It's that primordial healing sound. But can you talk a little bit about what that means in the context of, you have a passage here, the truth is there are no answers to the chaos that is pain. There's nothing to say except
Hineni, here I am.
Here I am.
Yeah. I am often called, I have been called by many of you here tonight, with stories that go something like, Steve, my best friend was just diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He's been given 3 to 6 months to live. I'm going back to New York to visit. What do I say? I don't know what to say. And my answer is not always, but often, just walk in the door. Just be present. Just show up. You've heard that sermon. Just show up. The 2 greatest men in the Bible, Hebrew Bible, are Abraham and Moses. And when they're called by God, they both say, Hineni. I'm here. There is nothing more beautiful or comforting to hear when you're suffering than another person reaching out and saying, I'm here. You don't have to say more than that. You know, the Navajo Indians have a beautiful custom. When someone in the village dies, the custom is that you go to the mourner's home, you walk in the home, you sit down, you stay a while, you get up, and you leave. You say nothing. You're just there. And that's enough. And the truth is, there's nothing to say. There's nothing to say. Your presence says it all. And whatever you do say will not be self-evident until you do show up and walk in the door. In my experience, my own personal experience, and my vicarious experience of suffering, is that the worst part of pain, physical or emotional, is the feeling of isolation, the feeling of abandonment, the feeling of being totally alone in that pain. That's what hurts. That's what's so frightening, to feel truly alone. And when someone pierces that darkness, it means everything. I say all the time, it changes nothing, but it means everything.
And what you do in this book, which is also very practical and helpful, is things like show up, be present, don't ask, what can I do for you?
Oh, that's so, yes.
Yeah, and I
Oh
found
my
that was
God.
a very
If you-
practical piece of advice.
Never, and some of you have heard me say this in my office to you when you've called me, you heard it in a sermon years ago. There are some things in the book about what to say. This is one about what not to say. Never say to a person who is suffering these 7 words. Let me know if you need anything. It is the cheapest kind of empathy. It's not even empathy, it's kabuki empathy. It's fake. You're hoping they don't ask. And even if it's sincere, it is placing the burden upon the person who is suffering. You're giving them homework. You're giving them a job to do when they can barely breathe. Just figure it out. You figure out what they need and do it. Help with carpooling. Help with play dates. Drop off a hot meal. Send a massage therapist to the house. Write the thank you notes. Shop for the groceries. Just walk in the door. Never say, let me know if you need anything. It increases a person's pain and sense of isolation. And that's not our goal. I try to live by a few very simple ideas. And one of the most important of them is, I just try to treat people the way I would want to be treated if I were in the same circumstance. If I behaved in some shameful way that destroyed my public reputation and embarrassed my family, I would want to be treated a certain way by my friends. I would want to be treated with kindness and compassion, not with condoning, but with kindness and compassion. So when I encounter someone whose life has imploded, I just try to treat them the way I would want to be treated. And I don't say, hey, let me know I'm sure this sucks, let me know if you need anything. That's not compassion.
And I'm going to jump ahead because we did have this talk about forgiveness. And forgiveness does not undo the past, but it does make a different future possible. What does it mean to say I'm sorry? And also in a culture today where every day, we're reading about
Yes.
new, what's the word?
Opportunities for apology.
Opportunities for apologies. You were, and I'm just going to say it outright, one of the last interviews that Charlie Rose did. So can you talk a little bit about what's happening in society today, asking for forgiveness, and most powerfully saying, I was wrong?
Yes. So that was quite, I have to say, I had a very now telling moment with him. I was interviewed by all 3. Gail King did most of the interview. She actually read the book, which was so generous of her. And Charlie only asked one question at the end. We were talking about, there's a piece in the book called The Prisoner Cannot Free Himself, about the importance of when we're suffering, the importance of being willing, humble enough to reach out for help. No one goes through pain better alone. No one. We have to reach out. We can't free ourselves from our suffering. And so we were talking about that, and Charlie looked at me with what to me felt at the time like a very different kind of look. This was 2 days before the whole thing blew up, and he said, and people will want to help you, right? And I said, they will. They will. And then afterwards, briefly, we talked about this concept in the book where I say, look, when you're in trouble and you reach out, the people who matter won't mind, and the people who mind don't matter. one of the things pain does is it strips away a lot of people from your life who were not your friends. So I've learned after all these years, not just being a rabbi, but a dad and a husband, a man, that the most important things are said with the fewest words. The most important things you will ever say or hear in your life are the things said with the fewest words. I do. It's a girl. No. Yes. She's gone. The most powerful things are said with the fewest words. And the three most difficult words for human beings to say, in my experience, it's not I am sorry. Because I'm sorry can mean a lot of things. I'm sorry I got caught. I'm sorry this happened. I'm sorry you think that I meant to. None of the guys are laughing at this. I'm sorry can mean a lot of things. The three most difficult and powerful words for most people to say are I was wrong. I was wrong is a much higher degree of culpability and responsibility than I'm sorry. And in my experience, saying I was wrong immediately changes the barometric pressure in the room. It takes the sting out. Now that doesn't mean you don't have additional steps to take to achieve real repentance and real forgiveness. But if you can't begin with those three words, I was wrong, then reconciliation isn't really going to be possible. And look, I've been asked in almost every interview about you have to change the name based on the week.
Yes.
The book came out November 7th, so the week of November 7th, it was Harvey Weinstein. The next week, you know, Charlie Rose. The next week, and then Al Franken, and then, you know, you can change the name, but it's the same issue. And asked, like, well, what would you say if Harvey Weinstein belonged to Wilshire Boulevard Temple and he was, you know, he came to you, which he doesn't, and he didn't. And what I would say is, look, this is the best and last opportunity you will have to really change your life. If this isn't bottom, and if this isn't painful enough to force you to change your life, then I have really nothing to say to you. But if this is bottom, then this is your opportunity to really change your life and live a freer, more honest, liberated life. This is your opportunity to really uncover and go to war with your demons, because this is about your demons. And there is another side to this. This is why the book is called More Beautiful Than Before, because we talked about this a little bit the other day. I think that what it means, spirituality is a word that's just, it's lost its currency because it's just overused. I can tell you what I think it means. What I think it means is to be able to hold within your soul two diametrically opposed truths, and to live within the dichotomous tension between those two truths. And in these cases, it's to be able to live with this truth that you can only be great by being completely humble. That humility is required for greatness. And greatness is required for humility. And it's being able to hold those two truths together in your heart and soul that is the essence of what it means to be a spiritual person. So if this isn't humbling, you can never be, truly great. It's this, and here's the other paradox. We are only whole after we're broken. People who have never been broken are of no interest to me. They're very dull. They have nothing much to say. The reason, I hope this doesn't embarrass you, Betsy, but I was wrong. I'll just say it later. I was wrong. It'll be okay. The night I met Betsy, on our first date, I noticed that she didn't have any hair on the back of her head. She had long hair that was covering the back of her head, and she didn't have any hair on the back of her head. And I said, what's this? It was the wind blew it, and she said, oh, did you see that? And I said, well, what is it? And then she told me about her cancer that she had just survived. We had a very deep and real conversation. She was interesting. She had something to say. So in this paradoxical way that I think is the essence of what it means to be spiritual, to be humane and not just human, is that we're really more whole when we're broken. There's a beautiful piece. I know I'm going on too long for a podcast because you're supposed to speed it up, but forgive me. There's this beautiful piece in the Talmud where the sages are discussing this verse in the Bible that says God places God's words upon our hearts. And the sages ask, why upon our hearts? Why not in our hearts? Certainly if God has the power to place God's words in our hearts, why upon our hearts? And the answer the sages give is that God places God's words upon our hearts, and it isn't until our hearts are broken that the words can enter. It's so beautiful. You do not know the depths of kindness until you have a broken heart. And it's not worth it. It's not worth the broken heart. That's not what I'm trying to say. But as I said earlier, it is definitely not worthless.
And there's so many things I want to talk about, but in
I'll give
relation to
shorter
what you
answers.
said, no, it's great. You said, well, you can see the storytelling and the lyrical quality of how you tell stories, which is what's so powerful. But linked to what we were talking about, and I was trying to find the passage, but instead of asking why me, the why not me,
Yes.
and how the sages say that kind of dichotomy that you're talking about of the world was created for me in one pocket, and then Abraham, maybe you could talk about
I am
that.
but dust and ash. Yes.
I am but dust and
Yes.
ash in the
So,
other pocket.
yes, the rabbis say we should have a slip of paper in each pocket. In one pocket, it should say, the world was created for me. That's a statement of importance and greatness. And in the other pocket, the words, I am but dust and ash. This was the rabbi's way of saying that we live within the tension of these two truths. They are equally true. You know, let's think about, for those of you who are, members of the temple, and those of you who will be someday soon, I hope.
Get a free book.
Think about our sanctuary and how it makes you feel when you enter. It makes you feel two contradictory feelings at the same time. You walk into the sanctuary and you have this feeling of grandeur, of transcendence, of, oh my God, which is what everyone says when they walk in there for the first time. You have this feeling of transcendence, of greatness, and smallness. Greatness and humility together. And it's generally pain that teaches the humility.
And pain is an invitation to be kind.
Yes.
And you talked about that earlier, but it's so powerful, the story by Rabbi Finkel, when he asked, who can tell me what the lesson of the
Yes.
Holocaust is?
Yeah.
And the blankets.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
So this is a story about a group of business people. Howard Schultz from Starbucks was one of them. Went on a tour to Israel. There are a lot of Jewish organizations that organize a lot of tours for wealthy people to go to Israel. He was on one of them. And they brought him in to see Rabbi Nissim Finkel, very famous rabbi who survived the Holocaust. And he asked this group, he also has Parkinson's, very hard to listen to, uncomfortable in a way for people that aren't used to that to be around. And he came into the room with these very powerful American business people, and he walked in, he was a no-nonsense guy, and he said, I've only got a few minutes. And he says to this group, I've only got a few minutes to be with you. He's obviously an emeritus rabbi, so he could talk like that. I've only got a few minutes to be with you. My question for you is, what is the lesson of the Holocaust? And one guy sheepishly raises his hand and he says, never again? And he says, no. What is the lesson of the Holocaust? And no one would answer. And he said, you're useless. This is the lesson of the Holocaust. When the Jews got off the cattle cars and were separated into men and women and then shoved into the barracks with whips and dogs, one blanket was given to every fifth person. And that person had to make a decision whether he or she was going to wrap him or herself entirely in that one blanket or spread it over 4 other people. And that is the lesson of the Holocaust. Now go back to America and spread your blanket over other people.
You talk about the importance of being uncomfortable.
Yes.
And you had a time in Africa.
Yes, in Uganda.
And
Yeah.
Uganda, and your journal entries are beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
What is the importance of discomfort?
If you Google the words most comfortable, you will get millions of answers. You can get the most comfortable anything. Most comfortable bed, most comfortable shoes, most comfortable airplane, most comfortable bra, most comfortable socks, you name it, you can get the most comfortable of it. We are obsessed with comfort. It doesn't teach us much. It's discomfort that teaches us. It's putting ourselves deliberately in uncomfortable conversations, in uncomfortable places, that forces us to find our humanity and to grow. I think Frank Welch is the one who said maybe it was Stephen Covey who said, if you're in business, if you're comfortable, you're doing something wrong. You're not pushing, you're not growing, you're not exploring. And I've always been a person, I remember very far back to something that happened in 4th grade. It's baked into my DNA. I've always been a person who runs toward trouble. And toward people in trouble and not away from it. In 4th grade, I remember we had there was a young girl in our class who was clearly emotionally disturbed. And I remember fantasizing to myself that I wanted to go to the teacher, whose name was Miss Hollingsworth. I wanted to go to her and say, I'm going to make up this girl's name because somebody might actually know who she was, but I'm going to call her Tammy. Could you just let me spend a few minutes with Tammy and talk to her? Because I think I could help her. Now, I didn't actually do it, but I fantasized about it. Like, I think if I talked to her, I could help her be better adjusted. And that's just baked into me. I seek out uncomfortable situations. I mean, I walk into really hard things. But it does something inside of me that I don't think I can get any other way. So put yourself in these uncomfortable situations. Work in the food pantry. Go to Africa. Go to India. Walk into your friend who's suffering. Be uncomfortable.
And you say that your one truth, which I say is your intent, is to inspire in all of us a life worthy of our suffering, a life gentler, wiser, and more beautiful than before. So that's beautiful. I want to talk and maybe end with the idea of prayer. And let me find this passage because I loved how you express prayer as an act of gratitude. And again, I'm just going to read a little passage so you get a sense of the beauty of these words. We pray to thank God, that power behind all powers, the power of the mountain and the sea, my children's laughter, my wife's shy smile, ripening fruit and flowers opening petals to the sun, the power of the cosmos and the quark, the power of breath in our souls each morning, the power of awe and wonder. We pray out of gratitude to that God, that force, that power, that miracle, that whatever word you choose, which grants us life itself. So can you talk about the power of prayer?
The first thing I would say is that many people confuse praying with wishing. The first Jewish prayer book was put together in the 11th century. There were prayers before that, but the first time a group sat around a table and said, all right, this is how it's going to go down. We're going to start with the Psalms, then we're going to do the Baruch Hu, then we're going to do the Shema, then we're going to do the Behavta, then we're going to do the Michamocha, then we're going to do the Amida, then we're going to do the Aleinu, then we're going to do the Kaddish, and then, Kiddush with Kichel. Okay? The first time that conversation happened was in the 11th century. Life in the 11th century was horrible. In the 11th century, half of all children didn't make it to their first birthday. A third of all women died just giving birth. There was no, epidural and a C-section with crushed ice and a DVD player. Okay, you were dead. You were dead. Here's some good news about the 11th century. There was no midlife crisis. Because you were a child till you were 12 or 13. Then you got married, had your own family, and by the time you were 35 or so, you were toothless and dead. Life was horrible in the 11th century. But the rabbis and sages put together a prayer book. They knew, they had to know, because they were surrounded by more horrible death and suffering than any of us will ever see in our lives unless we go to war. They had to know that all the praying in the world didn't keep people alive. The prayer book is not a book of wishes. If God was in the wish-granting business, all of our lives would be different. Prayers are mostly expressions of awe and gratitude, which means prayer is meant to create within us intention, to use your word. Prayer is about changing us. It is not about manipulating God. Now, this is often misunderstood, and therefore people are disappointed by religion and by prayer. But that's not because of religion and prayer. It's because they have confused praying with wishing. So for me, when I pray, I am trying to create a deeper sense of awareness within myself, a deeper sense of gratitude within myself. The first thing a Jew says upon awaking in the morning is Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam shehechazarta bi nishmati v'chemla rabbe emunatecha. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, who has restored to me my breath. We say, thank you, I'm awake. For the ancients, sleep was considered to be a kind of miniature death. And it was a miracle to them every day that they woke up. Is it to us? It can be with prayer. I also, under the theme of prayer is not about asking to get. When I pray, I also am praying to let go of things, to get rid of things. I pray to rid myself of anxiety, to rid myself of pettiness, to rid myself of jealousy, to rid myself of gossip, to rid myself of meanness, of unkindness. So prayer is awe and gratitude and letting go. That's prayer. And that's healing without the expectation of curing. I don't believe in curing prayers. I believe in healing prayers. And sometimes the healing comes from making peace with what will never be cured.
So, on that, will you end by leading us through?
I brought something.
Okay.
Yeah. Before we conclude, I brought up my morning prayer that I'm going to share with all of you. I want to say thank you. First of all, to all of you for being here. Many of you have allowed me to be on your journeys with you. Some of you have been on mine with me. I know when I look out in this room, and I know when I look out on Kol Nidre at 2,000 faces, I think I may be the only one in the room who really knows all of the stories and how much pain is in the room. So I want to, before I conclude with this, say thank you to all of you who allowed me to be a part of your journey and who have shown up when I've needed you. I want to say a special thank you to the remarkable friends who put this together tonight. I want to thank the husbands for being here, and I want to thank the women for making this thing happen. This is an irrepressible group that can do anything. So I want to say a real thank you to Robin and to Elliot, to Rich and Dana, to Laura, to Lauren, to Brad and Lisa and Richard and Tammy. Thank you. This was a lot of work. And I want to say a special thank you. Yes, please. I want to say a very special thank you to you, Mallika. Mallika is asked to do far, far more things than she can, than any human can. And for you to come and be here out of an expression of your love and friendship for Laura, I know, but also because the book did speak to you, and you have no idea what that means to me.
Can I just, again, meaningful coincidences. It turns out that your editor was also at my wedding.
My editor,
21
yeah.
years ago,
Yeah.
as well. And so this is
Yes.
a friendship that is
Yeah.
deep and feels like we've known each other forever.
Yes, and I hope we work together
We will.
to bring more healing and peace and intention to people's lives who need it so badly. And I really thank you for being here. Yes. And I won't embarrass them, but I want to say thank you to Hannah and Betsy for being here too. So this is a prayer that I say every day. I've said it every day since my surgery, and since I was able to somehow pull out of that dark depression that I was in for a few weeks. One of the things that my pain taught me was to have a greater respect for and kindness toward my own body. And this is a prayer that thanks God for the miraculous workings of our bodies. And I say this every morning, and so I thought I would end with it as an example, too, of how prayer can create a greater sense of gratitude. And this is a reminder, which I don't always heed, but I do more often than before, to take better care of myself. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe. Asher yatzar et adam b'chokhmah, who has created human beings with wisdom. Uvaravo nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim. It sounds so beautiful, doesn't it? Nekavim nekavim, chalulim chalulim. Who has created within us veins and arteries. Galui v'yadua lifnei chisei chvodecha. It is revealed and known before your throne of glory. She'im yipatech echad mihem, o yisatem echad mihem. That if one of them opens, or even one of them closes, it would be impossible to stand before you, afilu sha'a echat, for a single hour. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, Adonai. Rofeh chol basar, healer of flesh, umafli la'asot, and creator of wonders. Thank you all for being here tonight. I want to say a word about books, because you're going to find out when you go on to Amazon that there aren't any. So there will be. You can pre-order on Amazon and they'll get to you in 2 weeks, or you can get them tonight, but there won't be any between tonight and 2 weeks anywhere in the country. So now's the time. It's sort of good and sort of bad. But.
And I do want to stress, buy many, because this is a gift that honestly is impactful and moving.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'll be behind the table for those who want to say hello.